Have you ever hooked up, sex dating marriage, with a former school classmate 10 plus years after graduation? How'd it work out? Ran into her on my way home from work one night. Made those be nice to catch up and have a drink promises that rarely get kept. We're now a few months away from our 5th wedding anniversary. I did the exact same thing. Ran into the hot girl I'd had a crush on from my senior year. Had a drink together. One thing led to another and the divorce papers should finally be arriving next month. And I can put 4 years of anxiety, depression and poverty behind me. Gonna buy a house next year. No, but my ex-wife did. That's why she is my ex. My lawyer told me you can't believe his many marriages end this way. It happened at my wife's 20-year or 25-year high school reunion. Can't remember which. A couple that had never actually been a couple started to talk and then eventually got married. Then a few years later he beat her to death and drove to the police department to confess. He is currently in prison serving a life term. I had sex with the girl I lost my virginity to 15 years later. It was a great experience. From the nostalgia aspect, she still looked great and everything was very familiar. However, I had gotten better in bed and she seemed to be worse. Just unrhythmic. Not quite 10 plus years after graduation, but my wife and I went to the same high school. We were not friends at all. We had classes together and could recognize each other, but never spoke outside the classroom, and even in the classroom it rarely happened. We just ran with different crowds. Her friends were mostly stoners and I was the shy, awkward, geeky, athletic guy. We both went off to separate colleges and both ended up transferring back to the local university. A few semesters later our only mutual friend convinced her to take a class that I was taking with him. She ended up being pretty much the only reason I went to class. 3-hour-long night class. We had both just gotten out of long-term relationships, so nothing happened until a few months later. Had a really bad snowstorm and she lost power at her house. I invited her over since I still had power and she never left. Been married for 2.5 years now. My girlfriend and I went to high school together. We had one class together, band, and nothing else. I wasn't into anything female in high school and took no notice of her nerdiness. Flash forward 18 years later and via a mistext on Facebook we have been together for almost 2 years and she is literally me with a vag. Funny how life works out equals. 2 of my classmates hooked up about 15 years later. Got married. Had 1 child. Now divorced. I've never heard his side of things. I'd sure liked her, but what I heard from her was after the baby was born he wouldn't help out with anything and just seemed more interested in tinkering in the garage on whatever gearhead project he had. A girl I was friends with and I came very close to hooking up several months ago, but 2 days before we were to finally see what could happen her son had an accident and got 3rd-degree burns, so that pretty much put an end to what we had been wanting to try. We now are both seeing others. She did however send me a topless pic I'm not getting rid of. Well, I went to an all-boys school, so I'd have to make a pretty serious life change for that to happen. Mostly because those guys suck. My parents ran into each other at a bar the night before their 10-year class reunion. Neither one had a date for the reunion, so they went together. They celebrated their 50th wedding anniversary yesterday. A girl called Emily and I were involved with each other on and off during much of high school. She took my virginity when we were 16. But for all the times we hooked up, we never progressed to an official relationship. Things came to an end when I was 17. After she hooked up with one of my best friends, Matt, at a party. That turned out to be the start of a long-term relationship between them, which has continued to this day. I was quite jealous about this for the first couple of years, but the 3 of us always remained friends, and eventually we managed to get past all of our issues. Over the next few years, their relationship grew stronger, and it turned out that they were both into swinging. Meanwhile, I had a few brief, that is, months, relationships of my own. Until at 21 I met a girl called Ali. We were an incredible match. and are still together. With a very strong relationship. At the start of 2016. I am now 24. And after discussions with Ali, I asked Matt if they would be interested in a MFFM foursome. They were. And over the last 8 months things have progressed to us having a 4-person relationship. The arrangement is somewhere between non-monogamy and polyamory, that is. There are emotions involved. But we still primarily function as 2 couples. It's been a ducking wild ride. But I have no regrets. TLDR, boy meets girl. Boy and girl fool around in high school. Girl eventually leaves boy for boy's best friend. Boy is heartbroken for a while. But gets over it. Boy meets new girl and falls in love again. They all have a foursome. Yes. We're married and have a daughter. House and pets together. We weren't even friends in high school. So it's kind of funny. This is funny to me. Because there are definitely people I wasn't friends with, or just flat out had the wrong impression of, in high school that are now some of my closest friends. High school is a weird time. Y'all. Give some people a second chance. Anyway. Congrats on your life. Dude. I'm the exact opposite. My 10-year reunion is this year, sobs internally. And my high school friends have all managed to stay as close as ever. Everyone ended up back in Chicago after college and we never stopped bothering each other, lol. Since the day I met this girl when I was 14, I've been head over heels for her. We barely talked when we were running in the same circle of friends. After high school I didn't see her for almost 10 years other than updates on Facebook here and there. A few years ago I saw her at a show, we smoked a joint and I was nervous. Clearly still head over heels. We talked every day after that. At an event a couple years later and after a lot of booze I got the courage to give her a smooch, not knowing if she felt the same way. Our friendship had grown super strong and it was a big risk to ruin that. Turns out she had the exact same process crushing on me since back at the age of 14 and every day since then. We started dating. Moved to another city together and I'm going to propose to her in a couple months. There were some frustrations with us being shy and only finding out many moons later, but the timing worked out right. I'm 29 now and stoked she's the one I get to spend my life with and not just a few fun years in our teens. Bottom line, yes, we sleep together and every time is glorious. It's been 8 years since I graduated high school. I'm going out tonight with a girl I haven't seen since then. Will respond later with an update. Update, I've been outside her place for 20 minutes now. She's not answering her phone. And when I buzzed her apartment, some old couple who barely speaks English let me in thinking I was the pizza guy or something. I think I'm being stood up. Edit, I left her a friendly voicemail. Gonna wait a few more minutes to see if she calls back. Well, my father cheated on my mother with a girl he knew from high school. Long story short, my parents are divorced and she, the girl from high school, OD'd next to my father and died in the middle of the night. So in conclusion, not great. Lol, yes. I hooked up with this girl who was still in high school. When I was 19. We had fantastic sex. And nothing else in common. Her parents hated my guts. So did her older sister. She'd never smoked weed before, but we smoked a load of weed together. This was in like 1992 or 1993. I found her on Facebook in like 2005, I think it was. We had fantastic sex and little else in common. She hadn't smoked weed in years and we smoked hella weed together. Her family still hated my guts. We didn't exactly break up, she just moved away after graduating med school. She's a nice girl. She married some lady where she was interning. They look really happy together. We don't talk to each other at all. I met up with an old school friend who was visiting my city for a sales conference. It was exactly what you'd expect. After a couple of drinks she expressed her remorse at not leaving our little hometown. At marrying the dude she did marry. Wishing she succeeded at her suicide attempts. By the end of drink number 3 she was offering herself to me. 2 more rounds led to us in her hotel room. After our divorce, My ex-wife tore through the pages of her middle school yearbook like a Category 5 hurricane. Which really doesn't get less creepy the more I think about it. Not 10 plus years but about 5 years after high school I hooked up with the it girl of my class. She was every guy's fantasy during school and was drop dead gorgeous. I was never popular and very average looking. She matured a lot after high school and really liked me for my personality. We dated for about 5 months and had some of the best conversations I've ever had. Was epic. 10/10 would recommend please a godlet of the pen again. Hooked up with a woman I had a crush on back in high school. I felt like I'd finally found closure for all those nights of longing. When we got down to doing the deed, her pussy smelled like an unwashed armpit. She was puzzled as to why I wasn't interested in another romp after all that wooing I did back in high school. But how do you tell a woman her stench nearly made you throw up? There was a boy I had a huge crush on in high school. He was popular and played all the sports. I was the nerdy science girl. He never spoke to me in school, never rude. Just didn't have anything in common, but it was a small high school. So needless to say we all became Facebook friends once our 10-year reunion was coming up. I make some snarky reply to one of his posts. And we exchanged comments a bit that night. We messaged each other over the next few days and finally decided to meet up for drinks one night. I told him that since I didn't graduate from our school, I left and went to public school my last year, I needed him to take me to the reunion. After the first night we hung out. We spent every night together. After 6 weeks he proposed. And we were married 8 months later. We are coming up on our 6-year anniversary this winter. Met up with her when she came down to my area. Went bowling. Had a great time. She asked why we hadn't ever hooked up. I said why not now? We hooked up and I was happy as can be. We head out and a day later I get a friend request from her on Facebook. So I accept. The first thing I see is her status, married. I call her and say what the duck? You're married? She says yeah but he's in the military and won't be home for another 4 months. I am pissed because I said I'd never be that doucher who sleeps with a married woman. I told if she didn't tell him I ducking will. She breaks down crying saying for me not to because it would ruin their relationship and it's not like I'm the first guy she slept with since she's been married trying to justify it. I tell her off and she immediately blocks me. To this day I don't know if she told him but I hope that her husband found out what a cuntbag she was. Nobody deserves to be cheated on. Especially military members who are risking their lives so I don't have to risk mine. Had a crush on a classmate sophomore year who didn't reciprocate feelings. As he was straight. Fast forward a few years after graduation. And we're dating. Edit, we were dating. Girl from grade school grew up into an extremely attractive female. Saw her on Facebook one day. She recognized me. And did that I used to like you when we were kids. Ended up sleeping together for a few months. Now we're just friends. But it was worth it. Looked for her off and on for 30 years after moving to a different state after high school. This was in the 1980s. So once you lost track of someone, it was nearly impossible to find them again. She never showed up in any searches or social media for years. So I had just about given up on finding her. Out of the blue one day, she showed up in a Facebook people you may know ad. So I friended her. She accepted and we started catching up. And it turns out that she was married to the next guy she dated after we broke up. Once we had been talking for a while, she shared more about her life. And that her husband had tried having an affair 3 years earlier and their marriage had deteriorated ever since. Counseling didn't help. And she was increasingly isolated. She finally decided to confront him and try and get their marriage back. But instead of offering to move forward, he told her that he was done and wanted to end the marriage. He then spent 20 minutes explaining how everything was her fault and that she's a horrible person. As he walked away and she was processing everything, her phone vibrated and she looked to see what it was. It was my friend request. We've been together ever since. And I am moving back to our home state on Thursday to be closer to her. I guess this was a case of one door slamming shut so hard that it literally popped another one open. My grandparents got divorced a few years ago. Grandpa always treated grandma like shit and he eventually asked for a divorce. They were like 67 to 70 years old. Grandma got in contact with an old friend she'd known since elementary school. They hadn't spoke since high school. They dated for about a year and got married. They're doing alright now. He's pretty nice. Looks like Jack Nicholson needs a cigarette. Constantly chews Nicorette gum. My dad had a huge crush on the flautist next to him in high school band. She married the quarterback of the football team. And my dad became an electrical engineer and met my mom in another state. 30 years and many children later. Both my dad and his unrequited high school crush were divorced and living in their home state. They happened across one another on Match.com and ended up reconnecting. My siblings and I just flew down last month to celebrate their wedding with our new step-siblings. They're so freaking cute. I grin like an idiot whenever I see my dad grinning at her like an idiot. Married the woman I had a crush on back in junior high. She was a preppy, conceited, stuck-up girl. I was a freak that smoked weed up. So there was never going to be a connect back then. Caught up with her a few years ago. She was in a bad marriage. Spoiled kids. Hated life. We're now married for almost 5 years. We're in our mid-40s by the way. About 8 or so years after. Anyway, I had a crush on this girl in my super senior year. She was 2 years younger. Busty. Cute. Gorgeous blue eyes. She was a bit of a bookworm. But being young and stuff and not realizing when I had the chance. When I finally asked her out, she had gotten over me since I was hot and cold with her. I kind of alienated myself from her for a bit since I was pretty shaken up over it. Clingy and basically an immature teen. I'm pretty sure I was her first kiss too. One date we did end up going on. In a way, we maybe casually chatted a couple times since high school and got coffee once. Years went by and we never talked. I noticed she was single and asked her for drinks. We went out. Chatted, had a good time and eked. I drove home and she ended up calling me asking to come back. We slept together and actually had really great chemistry. Ended up hooking up 2 more times after that. I was surprised how good the sex was. But after the 3rd time we never got together again. The last time I heard from her it was a Merry Christmas. It's been I think a year or 2 years since. We still have each other on Insta or FB. But any communication I've attempted here and there just has this wall from her. Not a big deal but never was sure why. Had a big crush on a half black half Cuban girl in JR High. I was pretty overweight and unpopular but I made her laugh. Nothing came of it. About 12 years later I'm in good shape and thin. Turns out we work for the same place. We start hanging out. We start making out pretty hardcore. This happens a couple's times but doesn't do much for me cause she expressed she thought sex was yucky. After a couple times she asks if I have to jack off when she leaves. I say, no, this doesn't do much for me. We never talk again. We were really good friends in middle high school. She was like a little sister. She taught me how to drive stick and how to tie a tie. We even ended up at the same university. I moved away but every time I would visit home we would hang out. A couple of years ago I was home for my 25th high school reunion and we hung out at a beach house. She was house sitting for her mom's best friend. One thing led to another and right now she is lying next to me playing with the crazy kitten we adopted 2 weeks ago. We've been married for about 18 months now. I met a girl in 8th grade and we dated, went steady, during 9th grade for a short while. We tried to lose our virginity together but her parents were coming home and the anxiety got to us. Broke up on good terms and we stayed in touch over the years. She got married for 18 years and recently divorced. While she was divorcing, we ran into each other twice within a week and got to talking. Started seeing each other. Had amazing sex and a decent relationship for about a year. I had well managed expectations because I was clearly a rebound. But it was still a lot more good than bad. Broke up again on pretty good terms. She ended things by text. Otherwise very good terms, and still talk and are friends. I went to an event with her yesterday. In fact,